Sarah Martinez wiped the grease from her hands as she finished checking the last Humvee's engine. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the forward operating base in Afghanistan, making the metal tools almost too hot to touch. At 26, she had been working as a mechanic for the military for 4 years, but she still felt like an outsider among the tough soldiers around her. The other mechanics respected her skills, but the combat units often looked at her like she didn't belong. Sarah was small, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with calloused hands and oil stains permanently embedded under her fingernails. She wore the same desert camouflage as everyone else, but somehow she always felt invisible when the real warriors walked by. Her father had been a Marine, and her older brother was currently serving with the Rangers. Sarah had wanted to follow in their footsteps, but her parents convinced her to choose a safer path. "Let the boys do the fighting," her mother had said. "You're too smart to waste your life on the front lines." So Sarah became a mechanic, thinking she would be helping from the back lines, keeping the vehicles running so others could do the dangerous work. The forward operating base was home to several hundred soldiers, including an elite Navy SEAL team that had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Team 7 was legendary among the troops. Led by Commander Jake Sullivan, they had completed dozens of successful missions across the Middle East. Sarah had worked on their vehicles several times, and while the SEALs were always polite, she could tell they saw her as just another support person. That morning, Sarah received an unusual request. Commander Sullivan approached her workspace, his face serious and focused. "Martinez, we need you to prep our vehicles for a special mission tonight," he said, handing her a detailed list of modifications. "This one's different. We're going deep into enemy territory, and we need everything running perfectly." Sarah studied the list carefully. They wanted extra fuel capacity, reinforced tires, and enhanced communication equipment installed. The modifications would take most of the day, but she had done similar work before. What struck her as odd was the location they were heading to. The coordinates put them far from any known friendly forces, in an area that intelligence reports described as heavily defended by enemy fighters. As she worked throughout the day, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong about this mission. The SEALs seemed more tense than usual, and there were hushed conversations between the officers that stopped whenever she came near. Her instincts, sharpened by years of growing up in a military family, told her this wasn't going to be a routine operation. By evening, the vehicles were ready. Sarah had triple-checked every system, tested every modification, and ensured that the fuel tanks were completely full. She took pride in her work, knowing that these machines might be the difference between life and death for the brave men who would depend on them. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Team 7 gathered for their final briefing. Sarah watched from a distance as the 8 members of the SEAL team loaded their gear into the vehicles she had prepared. Commander Sullivan caught her eye and nodded, a gesture of thanks that meant more to her than he probably realized. She had done her job well, and now it was time for them to do theirs. The convoy rolled out of the base just after midnight, their headlights cutting through the darkness as they disappeared into the vast desert. Sarah returned to her workshop, planning to catch a few hours of sleep before starting work on the next day's vehicle maintenance schedule. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours everything would change, and she would be forced to become the warrior she had always been told she could never be. The emergency alarm shattered the morning silence at 0600 hours, sending everyone on the base scrambling to their positions. Sarah jerked awake in her small quarters, immediately alert despite having only gotten 3 hours of sleep. The piercing sound meant only one thing. A unit was in serious trouble and needed immediate assistance. In the command center, chaos reigned as radio operators tried desperately to establish contact with Team 7. Their last transmission had come in 6 hours earlier, reporting that they had reached their target location and were beginning their reconnaissance mission. Since then, nothing but static filled the airways, despite repeated attempts to reach them. Colonel Martinez, the base commander, gathered his senior staff for an emergency briefing. Sarah wasn't supposed to be there, but her supervisor had sent her to provide technical information about the vehicles Team 7 was using. As she sat in the back of the room, she listened with growing concern as the intelligence officer laid out what they knew. Satellite imagery showed that Team 7's vehicles were surrounded in a small valley about 60 miles from the base. Heat signatures indicated at least 50 enemy fighters had moved into positions around the SEAL's location during the night. The enemy had effectively created a trap, using the rocky terrain to their advantage and cutting off all escape routes. "The problem is simple," Colonel Martinez explained to the room. "We can't get a rescue force there fast enough. Any ground convoy would take at least 4 hours to reach them, and by then it might be too late. Air support is limited because of the terrain and weather conditions moving in from the east." Sarah's heart sank as she realized the full scope of the situation. The men she had worked with, the vehicles she had personally prepared, were now trapped in enemy territory with no immediate hope of rescue. The colonel continued explaining the limited options available, but Sarah was barely listening. Her mind was racing, thinking about the terrain she had studied on the maps and the capabilities of the vehicles she had modified. That's when she remembered something that might change everything. 3 months earlier, she had been assigned to maintain a special reconnaissance vehicle that had been damaged during a mission. It was a highly modified Humvee, equipped with advanced stealth technology, enhanced armor, and long-range communication systems. The vehicle had been designed for solo infiltration missions, allowing a single operator to get in and out of dangerous areas undetected. After its repair, the vehicle had been stored in a secure section of the motor pool, waiting for its next assignment. Most people had forgotten about it, but Sarah remembered every detail of its capabilities. The stealth modifications would allow it to avoid detection by enemy radar and thermal imaging. The armor could withstand small arms fire and even some explosives. Most importantly, it was fast enough to reach Team 7's location in less than 2 hours. During a brief break in the briefing, Sarah approached her supervisor, Sergeant First Class Williams. "I have an idea," she said quietly, explaining about the special vehicle and its capabilities. Williams listened carefully, his expression growing more serious as he understood what Sarah was suggesting. "You're talking about a solo rescue mission," he said slowly. "That's not what mechanics do, Martinez. That's a job for trained combat soldiers." But even as he said it, Williams knew that no one else was available who could both operate the special vehicle and reach the SEALs in time. Word of Sarah's proposal quickly reached Colonel Martinez. The colonel looked at the young mechanic with a mixture of skepticism and desperation. Every other option had been exhausted and time was running out. The latest intelligence report suggested that the enemy was preparing for a final assault on Team 7's position. "Martinez, do you understand what you're volunteering for?" the colonel asked. "This isn't a repair job. You'd be going into active combat against 50 trained enemy fighters. The odds of survival are extremely low, even with the special vehicle." Sarah met his gaze steadily, her voice calm despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Sir, I know those vehicles better than anyone else on this base. I know every system, every capability, and every limitation. If there's any chance of getting Team 7 out alive, this is it." The colonel stared at her for a long moment, weighing the impossible decision. Outside, the sound of distant artillery reminded everyone that while they debated, good men were fighting for their lives in the desert. Colonel Martinez made the decision that would change everything. "Martinez, you have authorization to take the stealth vehicle," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "But you're not going alone." He turned to Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran sniper who had volunteered for the mission. "Rodriguez will provide tactical support." Sarah felt a mix of relief and disappointment. She was grateful for the backup, but part of her had been prepared to go alone. As they rushed to the secure motor pool, Rodriguez briefed her on what to expect. "The enemy has positioned themselves in 3 main groups," he explained, pulling up satellite images on his tablet. "They're using the rocks for cover, but they've left gaps in their perimeter. If we can exploit those gaps, we might be able to create enough confusion to get our boys out." The special vehicle was everything Sarah remembered and more. Painted in adaptive camouflage that could change colors to match the surrounding terrain, it looked more like something from a science fiction movie than a military vehicle. She ran her hands over the controls, reacquainting herself with systems she hadn't operated in months. The vehicle's stealth technology was its most impressive feature. Advanced materials absorbed radar waves, while thermal dampening systems masked its heat signature. The engine had been specially modified to run almost silently, and the tires were designed to leave minimal tracks in sand and dirt. For someone who understood how to use it properly, the vehicle was nearly invisible to enemy detection methods. As they loaded their gear, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Rodriguez carried enough ammunition for a small war, including his custom sniper rifle and several different types of explosive devices. Sarah's loadout was simpler: her sidearm, extra magazines, and the technical manuals for every system on the special vehicle. The journey across the desert was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The vehicle moved like a ghost through the landscape, its adaptive camouflage shifting from tan to gray to brown as they crossed different types of terrain. Rodriguez monitored enemy communications through the vehicle's advanced radio systems, providing Sarah with real-time updates on enemy movements. About 20 miles from Team 7's location, they encountered their first obstacle. An enemy patrol had set up a checkpoint on the main road, forcing Sarah to take a detour through more dangerous terrain. The special vehicle handled the rocky ground expertly, but the detour added precious time to their journey. As they got closer to the target area, Rodriguez began spotting enemy positions through his scope. "I count at least 30 fighters in the rocks above the valley," he reported. "They've got the high ground and clear fields of fire. Team 7 is trapped in those buildings down there, and they're running out of options." Sarah could see the SEAL vehicles in the distance, partially hidden behind a cluster of abandoned buildings in the valley floor. Smoke was rising from one of them, suggesting it had taken damage during the night's fighting. Through the vehicle's advanced optics, she could see muzzle flashes as the SEALs returned fire at their attackers. "The plan is simple," Rodriguez explained as they took position on a ridge overlooking the battlefield. "I'll start taking out targets from long range, creating confusion and drawing their attention. While they're focused on me, you use the vehicle's stealth capabilities to get down there and link up with Team 7. Once you're in position, we coordinate our escape." Sarah nodded, but she could see the flaw in the plan. Even with Rodriguez providing sniper support, the enemy had overwhelming numbers and superior positioning. A conventional rescue attempt would likely result in more casualties, not fewer. As she studied the tactical situation through the vehicle's systems, a different plan began to form in her mind. "Rodriguez, what if we don't try to sneak past them?" she asked suddenly. "What if we use the vehicle's capabilities to take the fight directly to them?" She began explaining her idea, using the vehicle's computer systems to map out a route that would take them through the heart of the enemy positions. Rodriguez listened with growing amazement as Sarah outlined a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Instead of avoiding the enemy, she wanted to use the vehicle's stealth and armor to launch a series of hit-and-run attacks, systematically eliminating the enemy fighters while they were still confused about where the attacks were coming from. "You're talking about taking on 50 trained fighters with one vehicle," Rodriguez said slowly. "That's not a rescue mission anymore. That's a full-scale assault." But even as he spoke, he realized that Sarah's plan might be their only real chance of getting Team 7 out alive. As enemy fire intensified around the trapped SEALs below, Sarah made the decision that would define the rest of her life. "Then let's give them an assault they'll never forget," she said, engaging the vehicle's combat systems and beginning her descent into the Valley of Death. Sarah's first attack came like a thunderbolt from an empty sky. The stealth vehicle emerged from behind a cluster of rocks, its adaptive camouflage making it nearly invisible until it was too late. The enemy fighters positioned on the eastern ridge never saw death coming. Rodriguez's sniper rifle cracked twice and 2 sentries dropped silently from their positions. But it was Sarah who shocked everyone, including herself. As enemy fighters turned to investigate the sniper fire, she activated the vehicle's weapon systems. The mounted machine gun, controlled through the vehicle's advanced targeting computer, opened fire with deadly precision. In less than 30 seconds, she eliminated 6 enemy positions before vanishing back into the rocky terrain. The enemy forces erupted in confusion. They had been expecting a rescue convoy or air support, not a single ghost vehicle that appeared and disappeared like smoke. Radio chatter filled the airways as commanders tried to understand what they were facing. Some reported seeing a vehicle, others insisted it was a helicopter, and a few claimed there were multiple attackers. Team 7, trapped in the abandoned buildings below, watched in amazement as enemy positions around them suddenly went silent. Commander Sullivan tried to raise the base on his radio, but all he got was static. Then, cutting through the interference, came a voice he recognized but couldn't quite believe. "Team 7, this is Martinez. I'm here to get you out." Sarah's voice was calm and professional, but Sullivan could hear the tension underneath. Stay in your positions and be ready to move on my signal. Martinez. The mechanic? Sullivan responded, unable to hide his shock. How in the hell did you get here? Long story, Commander. Right now we need to focus on getting you home. Sarah was already moving to her next position, the stealth vehicle sliding through the terrain like a predator stalking its prey. I count 43 enemy fighters remaining. Rodriguez and I are going to thin them out, then extract you. The second attack was even more devastating than the first. Sarah had identified a group of enemy fighters using a natural cave as their command post. The cave provided excellent protection from air attacks and made them nearly impossible to assault directly. But Sarah wasn't planning a direct assault. She positioned the vehicle on the ridge above the cave and activated its most exotic weapon, an experimental directed energy system that had been installed for field testing. The device could superheat metal and rock from a distance, turning the enemy's protective cave into a death trap. Within minutes, the entire command structure of the enemy force was eliminated. Rodriguez provided covering fire as Sarah repositioned again, his sniper rifle picking off anyone who tried to flank the mysterious vehicle. But he was amazed by Sarah's tactical instincts. She moved like someone who had been doing this for years, using terrain and technology with an intuitive understanding that couldn't be taught in any military school. The enemy began to adapt, trying to coordinate their remaining forces for a concentrated attack. But Sarah had anticipated this. She had spent years studying these vehicles and their capabilities, and she understood something that the enemy commanders didn't. The stealth vehicle wasn't just designed to avoid detection. It was designed to create psychological warfare. Her third attack targeted the enemy's heavy weapons positions. Machine gun nests that had kept Team 7 pinned down for hours suddenly exploded in balls of fire as Sarah's precision strikes found their ammunition supplies. Each attack came from a different direction, making it impossible for the enemy to predict where she would strike next. The psychological effect was devastating. Enemy fighters began abandoning their positions, convinced they were facing some kind of supernatural force. Radio intercepts revealed growing panic among the remaining commanders as they struggled to maintain control of their increasingly scattered forces. Commander Sullivan watched the systematic destruction of the enemy positions with professional admiration and personal amazement. The young mechanic who had quietly serviced their vehicles was conducting a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Her attacks were precise, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. Martinez, where did you learn to fight like this? Sullivan asked during a brief lull in the action. Sarah's laugh came across the radio, but there was no humor in it. I've been watching and learning from the best soldiers in the world for 4 years, Commander. I just never had a chance to put the lessons into practice. But even as she spoke, Sarah knew the most dangerous part was still ahead. The remaining enemy fighters were consolidating their positions around the buildings where Team 7 was trapped. If she wanted to complete the rescue, she would have to abandon the hit-and-run tactics and face the enemy directly. The stealth vehicle's armor was impressive, but it wasn't invincible. If enough enemy fighters concentrated their fire, they could disable or destroy it. And without the vehicle, both she and Rodriguez would be stranded in hostile territory with no hope of escape. As enemy mortar rounds began falling around Team 7's position, Sarah realized that time had run out for clever tactics. The final phase of the rescue would require her to drive straight into the heart of the enemy positions, trusting in her skills and the vehicle's capabilities to see her through. Rodriguez, are you ready for this? She asked, knowing that what came next would determine whether they all went home or died together in the desert. Lead the way, Martinez, came the reply. I've got your back. The final assault began at 13:47 hours, as Sarah drove the stealth vehicle straight down the valley slope toward the enemy's main defensive line. All attempts at stealth were abandoned now. The adaptive camouflage shifted to an aggressive red and black pattern, designed to intimidate and confuse, while the vehicle's speakers blared a deafening electronic warfare signal that disrupted enemy communications. 22 enemy fighters remained, and they had positioned themselves in a semicircle around the buildings where Team 7 was trapped. Their plan was simple: wait for any rescue attempt and concentrate all their firepower on destroying it. They had rocket-propelled grenades, heavy machine guns, and enough ammunition to stop a tank. What they hadn't planned for was Sarah Martinez. The vehicle took fire from 3 directions simultaneously as she charged down the slope. Bullets sparked off the armor plating, An RPG round exploded close enough to rock the vehicle on its suspension. But Sarah kept driving, her face a mask of concentration as she worked the controls with the precision of a surgeon. Rodriguez's sniper rifle cracked repeatedly as he engaged targets on the left flank, but it was Sarah's driving and tactical thinking that kept them alive. She used the vehicle's momentum and armor to crash through a stone wall, emerging behind the enemy's main position before they could react. The machine gun mounted on the vehicle's roof swiveled on its gyro-stabilized mount, tracking targets with computer-assisted precision. Sarah's finger found the firing button and the weapon spoke with deadly authority. 4 enemy fighters fell in the first burst, their positions revealed by muzzle flashes that the vehicle's targeting system had automatically identified. But the enemy was far from finished. A fighter with a rocket launcher emerged from behind a boulder, the weapon aimed directly at the vehicle's side armor. Sarah saw him a split second before he fired, yanking the steering wheel hard to the right. The rocket missed by inches, exploding against the rocks behind them. Contact left. Contact left, Rodriguez shouted, engaging 3 fighters who were trying to flank them with assault rifles. His rifle barked 3 times in rapid succession and the threat was eliminated. But more enemies were moving to surround them, and ammunition was running low. That's when Sarah made a decision that would be talked about in military circles for years to come. Instead of trying to fight her way out, she drove directly toward the buildings where Team 7 was trapped, using the vehicle as a battering ram to break through the enemy's inner perimeter. The stealth vehicle smashed through an improvised barricade, scattering sandbags and debris in all directions. Enemy fighters dove for cover as the machine gun continued its deadly work, sweeping the area with precision fire. In less than 60 seconds, Sarah had eliminated 8 more enemy positions and created a clear path to the trapped SEALs. Commander Sullivan and his team emerged from the buildings, providing covering fire as they moved toward the vehicle. 2 of the SEALs were wounded, but all 8 members of the team were alive and functional. Rodriguez kept the remaining enemies pinned down with sniper fire while the SEALs loaded their wounded into the vehicle's cargo compartment. "Nice driving." "Martinez," Sullivan said as he squeezed into the cramped passenger compartment. "But how do you plan to get us out of here?" Sarah smiled grimly as she slammed the vehicle into reverse, backing away from the buildings while the machine gun continued to engage targets. "Same way I got in, Commander. Fast and loud." The escape was a masterpiece of tactical driving and coordinated firepower. Sarah used every feature of the advanced vehicle, from its enhanced suspension system to its run-flat tires, pushing the machine to its absolute limits. Enemy fighters tried desperately to stop them, but the combination of armor, speed, and overwhelming firepower proved unstoppable. Rodriguez's sniper rifle picked off 3 fighters who tried to set up an ambush at a narrow pass, while Sarah used the vehicle's electronic warfare systems to jam enemy communications and create false heat signatures that confused their targeting systems. The remaining 7 enemy fighters found themselves shooting at ghosts while the real target escaped through terrain they thought was impassable. As they crested the ridge and left the valley behind, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The stealth vehicle's systems showed multiple hits on the armor, but nothing had penetrated to the crew compartment. All members of Team 7 were accounted for, and Rodriguez was already calling in their position to the base. But the mission wasn't over yet. Enemy reinforcements were moving to intercept them, and the return journey would take them through territory that was becoming increasingly hostile. Sarah checked the vehicle's fuel and ammunition levels, calculating distances and probabilities with the same precision she used to diagnose engine problems. "How many do you think we got?" Rodriguez asked, reloading his rifle as he scanned the terrain behind them for pursuit. Sarah considered the question, thinking back over the engagement. Between her vehicle-mounted weapons and Rodriguez's sniper fire, they had systematically eliminated enemy positions with ruthless efficiency. 53 confirmed, she said finally. Maybe more in the command post explosion. Commander Sullivan stared at her with something approaching awe. 53 enemy fighters? You took out 53 trained combatants with 1 vehicle? We took them out, Sarah corrected, nodding toward Rodriguez. But yes, 53 confirmed kills. She paused, the weight of what she had done beginning to settle on her shoulders. And we're not done yet. We still have to get home. The journey back to base became a running battle that tested every skill Sarah had learned and every system the stealth vehicle possessed. Enemy forces, alerted by the destruction of their comrades, had mobilized every available fighter to intercept the rescue party. Radio intercepts revealed that a substantial bounty had been placed on the mysterious vehicle and its occupants. 3 separate ambush attempts were thwarted by the vehicle's advanced sensor systems and Sarah's growing tactical instincts. She had evolved during the fight, transforming from a skilled mechanic into something much more dangerous. The young woman who had nervously approached Colonel Martinez that morning was gone, replaced by a warrior who moved and thought like she had been born for combat. The first ambush came at a narrow canyon pass where enemy fighters had positioned themselves on both sides of the route. Traditional military doctrine would have suggested finding an alternate path, but Sarah drove straight into the kill zone at maximum speed. The vehicle's electronic warfare systems jammed enemy communications while smoke grenades created visual cover. Rodriguez and the SEALs provided suppressing fire from the vehicle's firing ports while Sarah used the terrain to her advantage, bouncing the vehicle off rock walls and using its enhanced suspension to maintain control at impossible speeds. Enemy fighters found themselves shooting at a target that moved like nothing they had ever encountered before. The second ambush was more sophisticated, involving a fake checkpoint manned by fighters in stolen military uniforms. But Sarah's instincts, sharpened by hours of combat, warned her something was wrong. The positioning was too perfect, the uniforms too clean, and the radio frequencies didn't match known friendly units. Instead of stopping to investigate, Sarah accelerated through the checkpoint, while Rodriguez's rifle eliminated the fake soldiers with clinical precision. The vehicle's armor absorbed return fire as they escaped the trap, leaving behind more enemy casualties and growing their reputation as an unstoppable force. The third ambush nearly succeeded. Enemy forces had learned from the previous failures and positioned anti-vehicle mines along the only passable route through a rocky area. Sarah detected the mines using the vehicle's ground-penetrating radar, but avoiding them meant driving through terrain that pushed the machine beyond its design limits. What followed was a masterclass in advanced driving as Sarah navigated a path through boulders and ravines that would have been challenging for a mountain goat. The vehicle's adaptive suspension system worked overtime, adjusting to the terrain millisecond by millisecond while the occupants held on for their lives. Commander Sullivan, a veteran of hundreds of dangerous missions, found himself genuinely impressed by Sarah's performance. "Martinez, when this is over, I'm personally recommending you for transfer to Special Operations," he said during a brief pause in the action. "You've got instincts that can't be taught." Sarah's response was cut short by proximity alarms as enemy helicopters appeared on the horizon. The aircraft had been scrambled from a distant base and were closing fast, their pilots determined to destroy the vehicle that had humiliated their ground forces. The stealth technology that had protected them against ground-based sensors was less effective against airborne threats. 2 helicopters, coming in from the northwest, Rodriguez reported, tracking them through his scope. "They're armed with anti-tank missiles. If they get a clean shot, our armor won't save us." Sarah's mind raced as she calculated options. The helicopters were faster than the ground vehicle, and the open terrain ahead offered little cover. Traditional evasion tactics wouldn't work, and they were too far from base to call for air support. Once again, she would have to rely on unconventional solutions. "Hold on," she warned her passengers, then did something that defied all logic and training. Instead of trying to evade the helicopters, she drove directly toward them, using the vehicle's electronic warfare systems to create false targets and confuse their missile guidance systems. The lead helicopter fired 2 missiles, but both struck decoy heat signatures generated by the vehicle's countermeasures. As the aircraft swept overhead, Rodriguez managed to get a clear shot at the pilot through the cockpit glass. His rifle cracked once, and the helicopter spun out of control, crashing into the desert in a ball of flame. The second helicopter's pilot, shaken by his partner's destruction, made the mistake of coming in too low for a gun run. Sarah waited until the last possible moment, then used the vehicle's jump jets, an experimental feature she hadn't had a chance to test until now. The vehicle leaped 20 feet into the air, and the helicopter passed directly underneath. Rodriguez and 2 of the SEALs opened fire through the vehicle's roof hatches, their combined firepower shredding the aircraft's tail rotor. The helicopter spun wildly before crashing into a rocky outcrop, eliminating the last aerial threat. As the base finally came into view on the horizon, Sarah allowed herself to feel the first stirrings of relief. They had traveled 60 miles through hostile territory, fought off multiple ambushes, destroyed 2 helicopters, and eliminated dozens of enemy fighters. Every member of Team 7 was alive and the mission was nearly complete. But she also knew that everything had changed. The quiet mechanic who had started this day working on engines would never exist again. Combat had awakened something in her that had been sleeping, and there was no going back to the simple life she had known before. As they approached the base perimeter, Sarah could see crowds of soldiers gathered to watch their return. Word had spread about the impossible rescue mission, and everyone wanted to see the mechanic who had become a legend in the space of a single day. The stealth vehicle rolled through the base gates to a sight Sarah had never imagined. Hundreds of soldiers lined the route, cheering and applauding as the battered but victorious machine made its way to the motor pool. The vehicle's adaptive camouflage was scarred and pitted from bullet impacts, and smoke still rose from several damaged systems, but it had brought everyone home alive. Colonel Martinez was waiting at the motor pool, along with what seemed like half the base command structure. As Sarah shut down the vehicle systems and opened the hatch, she was greeted by a spontaneous eruption of applause that made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had never been comfortable with attention, and this level of acclaim felt overwhelming. Team 7 emerged from the vehicle like conquering heroes, but Commander Sullivan made sure everyone knew who deserved the credit. "This woman," he announced to the gathered crowd, pointing at Sarah, "just accomplished the most remarkable rescue mission I've witnessed in 20 years of military service. She eliminated over 50 enemy fighters and brought us all home against impossible odds." The debriefing took hours. Sarah sat in a conference room packed with officers, intelligence analysts, and technical specialists, all wanting to understand exactly what had happened in the desert. She walked them through every decision, every tactic, every moment of the engagement with the same methodical precision she used to diagnose mechanical problems. The numbers were staggering. 53 confirmed enemy casualties, 2 helicopters destroyed, multiple vehicles and weapons positions eliminated, and 0 friendly casualties. Military analysts would study the mission for years, trying to understand how a single vehicle crew had achieved such overwhelming tactical success against superior numbers. But for Sarah, the most important moment came when Colonel Martinez pulled her aside after the formal debriefing. "Martinez, I've received calls from 3 different special operations commands. They all want you transferred to their units immediately. You've proven you have skills that go far beyond mechanical maintenance." Sarah looked out the window at the motor pool where she had spent the last 4 years of her life. The familiar sight of vehicles in various states of repair seemed strange now, like something from a previous lifetime. She thought about her parents, who had pushed her toward the safe path, and her brother, who would probably never believe what she had accomplished. "Sir, I appreciate the offers," she said slowly, "but I need some time to think about it. A lot has changed today." What she didn't say was that she wasn't sure who she was anymore. The Sarah Martinez who had woken up that morning no longer existed, replaced by someone she was still getting to know. Over the next few days, the story of the rescue mission spread throughout the military community and beyond. News reporters arrived at the base wanting to interview the mechanic warrior who had single-handedly taken on an enemy force and won. Sarah declined most interviews, uncomfortable with the attention and still processing the psychological impact of her first combat experience. Rodriguez, who had received his own commendations for the mission, became Sarah's unofficial protector, deflecting reporters and well-wishers when she needed space. "She's dealing with a lot right now," he would tell people. "Give her time to figure out what comes next." Commander Sullivan visited Sarah several times, offering advice and sharing his own experiences with the psychological challenges of combat. "The hardest part isn't the fighting," he told her during one conversation. "It's figuring out how to live with what you've done and who you've become. You saved our lives, but killing changes you. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't." 3 weeks after the mission, Sarah finally made her decision. She accepted a transfer to the Army's elite Delta Force, but with one condition. She wanted to complete advanced mechanical training alongside her combat preparation. "I don't want to stop being a mechanic," she explained to Colonel Martinez. "I want to be the best mechanic in special operations." Her reasoning was practical and typically Sarah. Special operations units relied heavily on advanced technology and specialized vehicles. Having someone who understood both combat tactics and mechanical systems at an expert level would make any team more effective. She could fight when necessary, but she could also keep the machines running when others couldn't. The transfer ceremony was small and private, attended only by her closest friends on the base. Team 7 was there in full dress uniform, along with Rodriguez and her fellow mechanics from the motor pool. As Sarah prepared to leave for her new assignment, Commander Sullivan handed her a small package. Inside was a custom-made mechanics tool, engraved with the words, "To the warrior who keeps us running." It was signed by every member of Team 7, a reminder of the day when a quiet mechanic had become something extraordinary. As Sarah packed her few belongings, she found herself thinking about the young woman who had reported for duty 4 years earlier, eager to serve but convinced she wasn't warrior material. Her parents had meant well, steering her toward what they thought was a safer path, but they had misunderstood something fundamental about their daughter. Sarah had always been a warrior. She just hadn't known it yet. The final surprise came as she was loading her gear into the transport vehicle. Her brother Marcus appeared at the base gates, having flown in from his own deployment to see her off. The decorated ranger looked at his little sister with a mixture of pride and amazement that brought tears to both their eyes. "Mom and Dad called me," he said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "They wanted me to tell you they're sorry for trying to hold you back. They understand now that you were meant for this." He stepped back and looked at her with the respect one warrior gives to another. 53 enemies, Sarah. 53. That's a number that will be remembered." As the transport pulled away from the base, Sarah watched the familiar buildings disappear behind her. She was heading toward a new life, new challenges and new opportunities to serve alongside the military's most elite warriors. But she would never forget the lessons learned in that desert valley, or the moment when she discovered who she really was. The story of Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez would become legend in military circles. Training manuals would study her tactics, and her name would be mentioned alongside the greatest warriors in American history. But for Sarah herself, the most important lesson was simpler. Sometimes the person you're meant to become is hidden inside you, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Years later, when young soldiers asked her for advice, Sarah would always tell them the same thing. Don't let anyone else define your limits. You might surprise yourself with what you're capable of when everything is on the line. And then she would smile, remembering a day when a unit's mechanic became their salvation, and 50 enemies learned that the most dangerous warrior is often the one nobody sees coming. The stealth vehicle, repaired and upgraded, would serve for many more years in special operations, but it would never again have a driver quite like Sarah Martinez, the mechanic who proved that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the person who fixes the machines can become the most formidable weapon of all.